Paige and Rachel in the same square. That is cracking me up. I love it when that happens. Well, welcome tonight. We're excited to share the new and revised volunteer structure with you. I want to give you a brief agenda of where we are going tonight, and then we will get started. So we'll start off with the why and benefits of governance, which is kind of the impetus for this whole thing and why we've decided to revamp the volunteer structure at this point. And then we will talk a little bit about the volunteer structure task force that's been operating since the past fall and the charge that we gave them. We'll then go through each team and give an overview of what the team structure will look like in the new volunteer structure. We'll give you some information about next steps, where we go from here, what the process will look like for rolling out this new structure and getting people into positions. And then we'll have a little bit of time probably for Q&A at the end. We want to keep this to general questions about the process. If you have team-specific questions about your volunteer team after we make our way through, we ask that you save those for your later team meeting or direct those to your volunteer supervisor or the folks that you see here tonight talking about your team today. Melinda, you can stay on that slide while I just talk a little bit about what we're doing before we talk about the shift to governance. So we're excited to share these plans with you. We know that some of you have probably heard or seen pieces of it, and I want to set the stage as we roll the whole thing out tonight about the why we're doing this before we dig into the who, what, and how. So for many years, National Council has
Did you hear me?
Oh,
okay.
Make sure that you're on mute if you are on. Thank you. For many years, National Council has discussed moving toward a more strategic governance model for the National Council, in which Council would play a strategic and visionary role, but generally would not engage in the day-to-day operational work of Sigma Kappa. And over the last 2 years, Council has really started to formulate a plan for putting this into action and to look at what that would mean both for Council service and for the work of the organization and how it would be done if Council is removed from the operational work of the volunteer structure. Although our staff has grown in size and professionalism over the past decade plus, Sigma Kappa remains a volunteer-driven organization, and your role in the organization is absolutely critical. We all serve Sigma Kappa because we want to give back to an organization that has given us a place to belong, and we want new members to enjoy that same sense of belonging that we've felt. So as we make this transition, it's important that we sustain opportunities for volunteers to be able to continue to engage and give back and share that connection with Sigma Kappa. It's also important that we have roles that are sustainable for members to engage and give back to Sigma Kappa with the capacity they have in their lives right now. Some volunteers in our current structure, and not just in the National Council, are essentially working full-time jobs for Sigma Kappa in addition to their regular full-time jobs. So making the load manageable has also been a key consideration of the work that you'll see unveiled tonight. Council appointed the volunteer structure task force to look at the work that Sigma Kappa has to do, both the work that Council currently performs and the work that our volunteers currently perform, and how that work can best be accomplished moving forward to support our chapters, both alumni and collegiate. I want to say directly that the task force didn't consider the individuals serving in roles when it was deciding what to do with the work. And none of the recommendations are directed at individuals. They're about what we need to do to best support our chapters. There are going to be changes, but I want to assure you that Sigma Kappa wants and needs every volunteer who wants to serve. There's a place for everybody. Reworking the volunteer structure allows us to better support our chapters and the member experience, and that is the ultimate why of what we're doing here tonight. So as you hear this presentation, you may see that your role looks pretty much unchanged. You may see your role, but with new or sometimes reduced responsibilities. And you'll see some new volunteer roles that may excite you and get you thinking about a new and exciting path for yourself in Sigma Kappa. So we hope that you'll listen today with an open mind and an open heart and come along with us on this quest to better position Sigma Kappa as a strategic leader within the National Panhellenic Conference, as well as an organization that provides outstanding support to our chapters and members through sustainable volunteer positions. Also, don't tune out after you see the slides for your particular volunteer team. The new volunteer structure works as a whole. So we want you to pay attention to the whole thing so that you can see where the work is going and how the different teams are working together. We'll start first with the why of the National Council shift to governance. If you attended the virtual volunteer summit, you've seen these slides before and you've heard me talk about this before, but we want to talk about it as much as possible because we're a year out now from the 2022 convention at which we would like to put these changes into effect. We don't want this to be a surprise to anybody, and it's a big organizational cultural change for Sigma Kappa. So right now, the National Council of Sigma Kappa performs mostly a management function. Its primary focus is management of operations, and that's built right into our bylaws. So the board has VPs that oversee specific subject areas like alumni or communication or recruitment. And the VPs are also instructed in the bylaws to manage and oversee volunteer teams in those subject areas. The board members are reporting directly to the board about their subject matter at our monthly meetings. So you'll get a report put into the agenda from each council member who's telling us what is happening in that area of the organization. And then the staff kind of has a dual reporting line to both a board member and a staff supervisor. So each council member is working alongside a staff counterpart who's kind of reporting to the board member, but also in reality reporting to a boss at national headquarters. That's either a senior director or the executive director. So that's, I'd say, 80% of council's focus right now because of the way that we are set up in our bylaws. The council also partly performs a strategy function, but I'd say it's definitely a secondary focus, and it's mostly what we do during board meetings. And that's to set a clear direction for the organization and monitor the strategic plan, to operate with foresight and prepare for issues in the pipeline, and to protect our assets and ensure financial resources. So the National Council is charged with doing this strategic component of being a board member, but because we also have this major operational role, we really only focus on strategy in our board meetings. And then once we leave the board meeting, we're back to helping to run the day-to-day operations of the alumni world or the collegiate management world, communication, et cetera. Our vision for 2020 is for the National Council to relinquish its management functions. So the VP for specific subject area titles would be eliminated except for the VP Finance, which we'll show you in another slide. And the VPs would no longer oversee volunteer teams. Council's management duties that are currently performed in our current structure would shift to staff and to our operational volunteers, our national volunteers, our local volunteers that are in the field working with our chapters and our members. So the Volunteer Structure Task Force made recommendations, and we are presenting those to you tonight and to the rest of our members in the coming weeks. And then we also have a staff structure audit going on with an outside company that's looking at the way that our staff currently operates and how staff may need to be reorganized or beefed up in order to support this change at the National Council level. The board would then shift its focus to strategy, I'd say about 80 or 90% of the time. This would be studying industry trends, preparing for issues in the pipeline, ensuring and protecting our assets. And again, we're doing those things right now, but we're not spending nearly enough time on it because of our management duties. The staff and operational volunteers would report to the board about programs and services. So instead of having your VPs provide a report every month at the board meetings, we would get those reports about what is happening in Sigma Kappa from our staff or from you, from our operational volunteers that are doing the work. And then council will retain its power to appoint and remove volunteers and to change membership status, which are currently duties of the National Council in the bylaws. that's not to say that the council might not give up those powers at a future convention or recommend that change for Sigma Kappa. But just to, to take one big change at a time, for now, the plan would be for council to retain those specific powers. The way that the board would look, so you can see that on the left, that's the way that our current board is structured. That may look familiar to you. You probably work with just one of the VPs on the board, but we have a national president and then 7 vice presidents that oversee specific subject areas. The vision for our structure in 2020 would be to have a national president, 2022, a national president, a VP for finance, and then 6 general VPs that are serving the board as a whole and not there representing specific subject areas of the organization or overseeing those teams. The benefits of that shift, the big numero uno, is that council can focus primarily on organizational strategy and foresight, both inside and outside of board meetings. So as we come to our Monday meeting, we read materials for big decisions that we need to make, things that are going on in NPC, declining college enrollment, the future relevance of sororities. And then in our current structure, once we leave the board meeting, we're back to doing operational work in our volunteer teams. Once we shift to governance, council will be able to focus all month long on those big picture issues and nothing else to make sure that Sigma Kappa can position itself as a strategic leader. The pool of candidates for National Council would also expand to all Sigma Kappa strategic thinkers, strategic leaders, rather than a presumed line of succession through our operational volunteer teams. The council roles would become increasingly manageable for professional women. And this also modernizes the board from a model that's more typical of new organizations that lack professional staff. And so, the current board model where we have VPs for specific subject areas that are really overseeing operational work is typical of a new type of nonprofit that hasn't yet built up its staff. But over the past decade plus, we've been doing that, and we're ready now to turn over those operation and management functions. And then just as a point of information, more than 2/3 of our NPC peers have transitioned to general board VPs in a governance model. There's only a few organizations that are still using the model that Sigma Kappa uses, where we have the specific subject matter VPs overseeing operational work. Enter the Volunteer Structure Task Force. So in order to support this shift to a governance model, we realized that we have lots of National Council members, and it totally depends on the position, that are spending a lot of time every week focused on operational work. And if the council is going to get out of that business, then those responsibilities need to be shifted elsewhere. And that will include both to staff and to our operational volunteers, our directors and our coordinators who are working directly with chapters and members every single day. So we appointed a volunteer structure task force. And I'd like to show a brief video put together by Madison Clark, who was the volunteer chairman, and Molly Hudgens, who is our staff liaison, to tell you about the work of the task force and before we give you their recommendations.
Hey y'all, my name is Madison Clark, and I am an initiate of our Theta Psi chapter at Auburn University. In Sigma Kappa, I serve as the new chapter finance coordinator, as well as the finance advisor for Theta Psi. And I had the pleasure of serving as the chair for the Volunteer Structure Task Force the last few months.
Hi everyone, my name is Molly Hudgens. I'm an Alpha Tau from Michigan State University, and I work on staff as the Director of Growth, and was lucky enough in my role to be the staff liaison to this Volunteer Structure Task Force. So Madison and I are so excited to get a few minutes of your time this evening to share the work that we did over the last several months, who we were on this task force, and kind of how we came to the recommendations that you will see this evening. So I want to first share my screen and share all of the other wonderful women that were a part of this task force with us, because it was definitely not just Madison and I. As you can see, we cover many years of experience, both volunteer and in other organizations besides Sigma Kappa, and many chapters and all sorts of wonderful roles and teams in Sigma Kappa. So from this very stacked list that you see there, we have over 68 years of just Sigma Kappa volunteer experience represented in this group, much more beyond that in the other organizations we serve. And we also represent so many job industries just from this group of women alone. We have experts in change management and nonprofit management. We also were lucky enough to have a current collegiate chapter member perspective, so we made sure to capture their input as well. We had past national council and staff members, including many former leadership consultants and a past executive director. We had higher education professionals and experts in data collection and group surveying. So this group of women here was so prepared to pull this information together and share with you all these recommendations.
So a little bit about our purpose and charge. Our objective was to analyze our current national and local volunteer structure, make recommended changes based on the support our chapters need, and look at duplication of work, and then consider what changes would best support a shift to a national council governance model where council members are not tied to specific subject matter areas and can spend their time in the strategy sphere. So how we accomplished our work, looking at our timeline. So our task force was formed in September of 2020. And we had our initial meeting at the beginning of October. And then by the end of October, we created a survey that went out to the membership, which included national volunteers as well as local advisory board members. Then throughout November and December, the task force met with members of National Council as well as their staff counterparts to gain anecdotal and qualitative data. And then we began analyzing the initial results of the survey as well.
And in the new year, throughout January and February, once we had some of that initial data and knew some of the directions we needed to move, we split ourselves up into smaller subgroups to divide the work and to be able to meet more frequently. So these three main subgroups that we had to focus on were National Council tasks and responsibilities, the national officer structure and their roles, and then the local advisory board structure. So we met in small groups and rotated through these topics throughout January and February. And then by March, we came back together as a group of all of us to review and finalize all of the details of, yes, we of course have pets that join us for these calls. By March, we finalized all of the details to present to National Council. And then on April 1st, we were able to share all of our findings in their finalized form with Council. And then throughout April and May, we have been able to review those suggestions with Council and staff so we can get them edited and polished and ready to share with you all today, so they are in their best possible format.
So a little bit about where we landed. The Volunteer Structure Task Force compiled recommendations for National Council roles, National Volunteer roles, and local advisory boards roles. So we looked at the entire volunteer structure from National Council to local advisory board. For members at the council level, we made recommendations in line with the most common governance practices, which includes removing direct responsibilities and all day-to-day tasks, and then shifting those to other staff and volunteer teams. As this workflow shift would directly impact staff the most, some staffing recommendations have also been included.
So then in regards to the national officer structure, we focused on how to best serve the collegiate officers and members, because that is what a lot of your volunteer roles as national officers do, just working with collegians, and then how to provide better training for all subject matter volunteers and to give you the training that you need to feel confident. We really focused on empowerment. We wanted to empower our local boards to make decisions independently. And that requires the investment in the training to do so, both at the local level and at the national officer level.
So finally, for advisory boards, we made recommendations which support our ideals of empowerment, especially at that local level, and to allow advisory boards with structure to choose the advising roles most necessary for their chapter needs, which is something we're very excited to share with y'all. This group's recommendations are structured with the ideal that our local advisory board and national officers' driving purpose is to provide the best support possible to our collegiate chapters and officers and to ensure their long-term success. So we are excited to have had the opportunity to work on this the last several months. And now we're super excited to share these recommendations with you. And thank you so much for your time.
Fabulous. A huge thank you to Molly and Madison. I feel like they've heard us say thank you like 500 times at this point, but we really can't express enough how much we appreciate this task force. You saw the names of the members serving on it, and they just did outstanding work on a really compressed schedule to study everything that we're doing and make recommendations for how we can do it better. So as we shift on to the volunteer structure, a couple of things to note. As Molly and Madison mentioned, the charge of the task force was to create a structure that best supports our collegiate chapters, with the National Council shifting to a governance board. Their changes are extremely rooted in data, including surveys and then individual conversations with council members and staff members about the work that each team performs. They had their work cut out for them, and we are excited to share with you what they have come up with tonight. And the overarching emphasis is to push knowledge down and empower our volunteers at the local level to be able to assist our collegiate chapters without pushing questions up. Some positions have been reimagined, and you'll hear about that on the individual slides for each team as we go through, but we've also added a ton of new positions, and that will allow us to increase the volunteer options available and hopefully interest and engage new volunteers that we can bring into our structure. The data also showed a high need for training. To be able to push a lot of decision-making down to the local level, we need to more adequately train our volunteers and give them the information and the confidence that they need to assist people right away. So don't stress, programming team, that is not necessarily coming from you. You will see training spread through many teams with staff support as we go through the structure today. All volunteer job descriptions are being rewritten as we speak. And then you'll note that the majority of what you're going to hear tonight is about the national volunteer structure and the proposed changes to that. We are still fine-tuning the recommendations for the local level modifications, advisory boards, and gathering insight from ABSs. So more information on that coming soon. The first big announcement, which you can see on the slide, is that we are shifting to 8 districts starting in January 2022. We're working on that distribution right now. It's an agenda item for our June 21st meeting to consider different options for how we can redivide the districts to make the workload a little more manageable for district volunteers. And so that is announcement number 1 as we go through. I'd love to turn it over to our executive director, Jordan Bentledge, for probably my favorite analogy that I've heard in the last several years.
Thanks, Anne. Hey, everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces. It's wonderful to see you all here tonight. And yeah, like Anne said, when we were thinking about the different components of this transition, we were thinking, okay, what's going to help us make sense of all of this? And I don't know about you all, but a visual definitely helps me wrap my brain around the different components a little bit more. So that's how we came together and came around with the French braid analogy. So as you know, in a French braid, you have to start with 3 different sections of hair. And in this transition, there are 3 different sections as well. So the one section is the governance transition that Anne just mentioned. The second section is the volunteer transition, the volunteer structure that we are going to go over tonight, and then the local structure that is coming in the next couple of months. And then that third section is the staff structure transition, and that will be coming in early fall. So as you probably know, in a French braid, you start with those 3 different sections. And as you work down the head, you pick up the different sections of hair and work those into the braid. And that's exactly what we're doing in this transition. We are going to begin to put all of these 3 different sections or areas together to start forming that French braid. As we continue towards convention, we're going to continue to add different aspects into that transition. Some of those other sections of hair in different pieces that we are going to pick up are bylaws amendments that are forthcoming, information on appointments, and lots of education to help you all better understand governance, to help our collegians and advisors better understand governance, and to help everybody understand how these things fit together. So our goal is that following Convention 2022, our braid is complete and we are able to finish it with a pretty little bow. And with anything that is new, the transition is a little messy. And when you begin French braiding, it's also a little overwhelming, right? My first transition, or my first French braids are always messy. I'm very overwhelmed. I get flustered. I want to quit, but I want my hair to look as cute as it does in that French braid. So we keep going, right? This is a lot of information to absorb. We're throwing already in the first 28 minutes, a lot of information at you in terms of what is governance, what this volunteer structure task force was charged with. It's a lot of information. Staff and council have had a little bit of time to wrap our brains around it. We know that this is the first time you are hearing it. So be patient with yourself, be patient with others, because you're going to get there. By the end of the week, we are sending out lots and lots of information to you all, including the Zoom recordings, including a lot of documentation so you can see the changes instead of just on the screen, and you can process them as well. So what we ask is that you please be patient with us and ask questions. We are going to move into sharing the volunteer structure with you. And we want you to ask questions to the general structure. If you have specific team questions, those are probably better served for the time with the individual teams that you'll be having in the next couple of weeks. That way we don't inundate everyone with the details of the plan. We kind of want to keep this to about 90 minutes if possible. If we have to go a little bit longer, we're absolutely happy to. Because those stray questions, are like those stray hairs. So we want to incorporate all those questions into the FAQ documents that we are creating and make sure that we have all of the information and are able to gather it so we don't miss any things. So there you go, the analogy of the French braid. And we are ready to hit it. We are, like I said, like Anne said earlier, pay attention to all of the slides. I ask that you try not to unplug during, only pay attention to Sarah and the alumni because I'm an ADD or I'm a alumni volunteer, but there are other aspects of other teams that definitely fit into the different roles. We aren't as linear as we were. We are spreading that out and sharing the work among all of the teams a little bit more. So without further ado, Sarah, take it away with the alumni team.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to be sharing the Reimagined Alumni team. I think the most important thing to note starting off is the alumni team's focus of work remains the same, engagement with our members. And that's very exciting because we're growing. We're adding an ADD, and we're still maintaining our 3 director roles over alumni experience, alumni chapter management, and the collegiate alumni relations. There'll be some tweaks here and there in those roles, but largely that work will remain the same and continue to expand. It's very exciting. One role that is getting reimagined is our collegiate alumni relations coordinators will now move to more of a council, an advisory council role. So they'll be supervised by the director of collegiate alumni relations, and continue to really support and assist those collegiate chapters nationwide to development and really build that engagement with their alumni members. So it's really exciting what this advisory council can do. And it has the flexibility to go between maybe 3 to 8 members, and it serves the entire nation. So therefore, it's not district-based, which is exciting. The other role, I am over the moon. I'm doing cartwheels. You can't see it, but I am, is our director of volunteer training. This role affects every single volunteer on this call. And I'm thrilled. I've been wanting this role, and this person will oversee all national officer training, really supporting you, making sure you have the resources you need. What training, what further development, are you feeling fulfilled in your role? This person will be there to help navigate your volunteer journey. And they will have direct support with our alumni engagement manager on staff. Another brand new role, alumni experience coordinator. This person will be supervised by our director of alumni experience and do that, just that. Really look to expand the alumni experience. There's so many things, there's so many opportunities. It's pretty much boundless. So very exciting, very probably overwhelming, but there you go. So thank you to Mallory and the communications team for creating these beautiful little visuals of said teams. So you'll notice there's some solid lines and then some dotted lines. The solid lines indicate that direct report in, then those dotted lines are just that extra support from either staff, maybe another volunteer team. So you're gonna see that throughout every team's slides. But that's your visual. I will turn it over to Megan.
Thank you, Sarah. As we dive into the collegiate management portion of our conversation today, there are really 3 sections. There's the overall collegiate management section, there is the risk management section, and later on in our conversation, there'll be pieces about the advisory board supervisor and the overall advisory board structures. And so that's a lot later, but that makes a big difference in how the previous segments work. So as Jordan shared earlier, make sure you're paying attention to all these pieces because they definitely do work together. So a couple of really big pieces. Jordan shared that we're shifting to 8 districts. That makes a big difference in the land of collegiate management. So now instead of having 7 CDDs plus a few other folks, so one focused on new chapters, one focused on specialized chapters and risk management, we will now have 8 plus the CDD for new chapters and the CDD for specialized chapters. So 10 CDDs all together. They will now directly shift their responsibilities and will now manage the ABSs within their district. For these structures that are the chapter advancement programs, so that would be specialized chapters and new chapters primarily, nothing is changing there. And a large reason for that is because some of the things that those teams have worked on are already in direct alignment with where we are headed with this volunteer structure. So we've already got some of those pieces in place and we've been working toward it, and it's been working well so far. So we're leaning into that too. We will be changing the structure of collegiate coordinators, and that position as it currently exists will not exist moving forward. So I know there's a few of you on the call this evening and several of you who have been collegiate coordinators on the call this evening. So keep that in mind, that role is shifting. We know in multiple conversations over time, that role has, for some of us has worked well, for many of our collegiate coordinators has not worked particularly well. And that definitely came out in the surveys and in the feedback. And so making that shift. We have several additions to the new collegiate management structure, and I'm really excited about all of these. The first is that we will be appointing 2 directors of collegiate chapter management. Those individuals will be supervising and supporting the collegiate district directors. They will be 2 individuals who will be overseeing half each of the team of 10. So one will supervise 5 and one will supervise 5 and support those individuals. They will be the direct counterpart to Jordan Feldhaus, who's the director of collegiate services on staff. And that is the role that I currently play right now, is being Jordan's direct counterpart. And so those 2 individuals will serve in that capacity, supporting the team. Sarah talked a lot about training and some of the great things that come along with training. And for those of you who've gotten a chance to work with me in the last couple of years, you know that's been a big ticket item on my list is training, training, training. We will now have a director of collegiate management training, which I think is going to be really spectacular. And that person will now be the leader for a team of collegiate volunteer training coordinators. So that's a little bit of a mouthful, but we will have one of those per district. So some of what the collegiate coordinators do right now is help to recruit, help to train our ABSs and our advisory board members. That part of what our collegiate coordinators do is what is being accumulated in this collegiate volunteer training coordinator role. And so we'll have one of those for every district as well as that director. We really hope that will help fill some of the needs that are vacant at times, and also make sure that our ABSs have the support they need and the training they need to not turn over as much as they have in the past, and to be really confident in those roles so that we can minimize some of the challenges that we have. You see here the diagram of the collegiate management team in this new articulation, and you'll see some of the dotted lines again, as well as the straight lines for direct reports as well as shared reports. And remember, we will share these documents out with you a little bit later on, so you don't have to memorize them all today, but there'll be opportunity later on. When it comes to the risk management team, we are making some big changes there as well. So currently we have one director of risk management, and that will be shifting into two directors of risk related things. So we will now have a director of harm reduction who will oversee what is currently the risk management coordinators. So right now we have a risk management coordinator per district. Those roles are not changing in that each of those individuals will be supporting a district, will be working with the collegiate members, navigating social function review forms, helping to prepare our chapters to reduce the risk and reduce the harm that may come. And we will also have a director of risk management programming. And that person will oversee a risk management programming team. So that will be a new team of individuals who operate somewhat similarly to our current Live with Heart facilitator team, who go around the country and facilitate sessions for our chapters upon request. In this case, it might be upon request or it might be upon direction, depending on what's going on with their risk management situation. But that will be a group of individuals who will travel around and facilitate work. So again, you see that you see how the structure is changing. A key piece that if you're not already familiar with this, I think is a really important component is this spring, we were able to hire a collegiate support manager to focus on risk management and supporting our chapters with risk management. And Kat Corso has been filling that role for the last few months, and we are thrilled to be able to have that change and have that support. And so Kat and Stacey Lona Hicks have been working closely together, and we anticipate as we shift and have two directors, that team of three would work closely together. That is the collegiate management, risk management structure. Again, we'll get to ABSs and advisory board structures a little bit later, and it's time to move over to the communication team. And I believe Pam and Diane are here to talk about that this evening.
Yes, thank you, Megan. So the major modification on the communication team relates to the Collegiate Public Relation Coordinator, CPRC role. So no longer will they be split by district, only working with chapters in a specific district. Rather than the CPRCs, the Volunteer Structure Task Force recommended that we transition to an advisory council that is made up of 5 to 10 subject matter or industry experts. They will create training and assist collegiate chapters nationwide from their specific lens. Some of those experts may specialize in various regions of the country, such as the East, West, Midwest, and South. This change will more fully utilize our advisory council volunteer skills, professional experience, so that they feel valued. Individual chapters will also be able to schedule time as needed with the advisory council volunteers to assist with social media, chapter branding, and PR materials. On the next slide, you will notice with the communication team chart, there are dotted lines from staff to the Director of Public Relations, our Advisory Council, and the Director of Online Communities, along with the editors. The Advisory Council concept will allow staff the staff team to tap more closely into the expertise of these volunteers for assistance with communication plans, initiatives, and help staff promote collegiate as well as alumni engagement throughout the entire organization. This should tailor nicely with the transition to the governance model. And now I will turn it over to Molly to talk about the extension team.
Hi, everyone. So a lot is remaining the same on the extension team. As many of you are probably aware, extension is in a relatively downtrend and has been for the last at least 2 years. And so because of that, we examined the positions. We found them both to be valuable to the experience, but definitely in this past year had women sitting in them that could have been doing great things for Sigma Kappa and now are, because the roles are not filled. And so because of that, it led us to the kind of easy conclusion that we were going to keep the extension development coordinator and the resources coordinator, but only appoint them at the time of an extension project arising. So they will report up to me as the director of growth or to staff, whomever that is, me currently. And that's kind of the extension team. Pretty straightforward. So off to the Panhellenic team.
All right. The Panhellenic team. The Panhellenic team is effectively remaining the same. We're just going to add 2 more people to it. So remaining the same is the Director of Panhellenic Management, also called the CPO, which is very confusing in Sigma Kappa land, but it stands for Chief Panhellenic Officer in the Panhellenic world. The Director of Panhellenic Operations, those positions will stay the same, but we'll add a 4th person to that role. There are currently 3. And then the Panhellenic Coordinator position will stay the same. They will directly advise the Panhellenic delegates in their district, similar to what they're doing now. And because we are adding an 8th district, we'll add an 8th Panhellenic Coordinator. So nothing real big on the Panhellenic team except for 2 new volunteers. There's a visual depiction of it. You've got the Director of Panhellenic Management, 4 Directors of Panhellenic Operations, 8 Panhellenic Coordinators, and they're supported by the Director of Growth and the Director of Collegiate Chapter Services, since most of the things that come up for the Panhellenic team relate to recruitment and chapter management type things. And I will turn it over to our programming team.
Okay, lots of words on our slide because we've got some changes for sure coming our way. So remaining the same on the programming team. So we have 3 creative team coordinators currently that help develop content and subject matter when we need something specific to any kind of a topic. And so that will remain the same. So the change for them, instead of reporting to myself as the council lead for our team, they'll report to staff. So, and we've been modeling that along the way as it is. Our Live with Heart facilitator team, no changes there. So we've added a couple DEIA Live with Heart facilitators in the past month or so. So that's the only change. Structural changes, these are the ones that I'm most excited about. So the Director of District Programming, she oversees, that's kids in the backyard behind me, sorry about that. She oversees all of our programming coordinators currently, and we are splitting that into 2 positions. So programming coordinators as well will be split into 2 positions. And so when we have talked to our programming coordinators and others that interact with our team, what we really found is that their programming coordinators get bogged down with all things the Promise program and new member experience, and the true programming, prescriptive things, strategic programming, time with chapters, they just aren't able to get to that. So very similar to what Ann was describing with the operational things that council does versus the strategic things that we want to do. And so with that, we're splitting up the role to programming coordinators for new members, which will focus on the new member experience, and programming coordinators for the member experience, which will focus on true programming when you think about workshops and other educational opportunities. And so you'll see 10 PCs there. We have 8 districts, and then our team also utilizes programming coordinators for both new and for specialized chapters. We'll have a director that oversees each group of that 10. So going back up to the top for a minute. So the Director of Lifetime Programming, her duties have been kind of taken apart a little bit and shifted to the alumni team, alumni experience coordinator role, and a couple other little pieces here and there. And then the director of service has been removed. So that position has been vacant for about a year now. And so what we have realized is that many of the things that volunteer did have kind of really been overtaken in terms of by staff. And so it's kind of been strategic in terms of here's what we want to do, and staff have just rolled with it. And so it's not really something that we've needed. So you'll see our structure there. So the programming team staff, and Mary is on the call, I know, they will kind of be that person or be those people for the programming team moving forward. And so right now our directors already work directly with me, but then also Mary and her team. And so we'll continue to model that and take the MVP of programming out of the picture. And so that's what that team will look like moving forward.
Okay, recruitment friends. So again, not a ton of change to this team. As you can see right up there at the top, everything that is remaining the same. So all of our current directors, director of COB, recruitment volunteer training, new and specialized recruitment, the recruitment trends coordinator, and the recruitment coordinators all remaining the same. A change will be that we will now have a second director of recruitment. So there will be two, and they will be able to split that to the districts, so 4 and 4 apiece, to kind of oversee the overall recruitment big picture work. And then the biggest structural change to discuss will be that the recruitment supervisor position in its current form is being reimagined because that role and the vice president of membership advisor are being combined. And so that position will now be called the recruitment advisor, and she will sit on the advisory board. She will still have subject matter expertise training from her recruitment coordinator. She will still have that kind of connection point in her district like an RS currently would, but she will also be involved on the advisory board, be a member of the advisory board, and be integrated into the chapter in that way. And as Jordan Feldhaus will talk about in a little bit, when we talk more about the board position, you'll see that there are some more specific recruitment positions that could come under that recruitment advisor and how they can all work together. And, you know, isn't that just a beautiful, colorful craziness there that you see? But this is kind of all of the fun dotted lines of everyone on the recruitment team who will be working together. Growth staff kind of in the nucleus, everyone working around. But when we look to volunteer training, we see that there are touch points with the director of growth role, but all of programming staff and all of those other wonderful folks. So that's recruitment. Thanks. I think we're on to finance.
I was waiting for you to say finance is fun, Molly.
No, I stole it from you last time, so I didn't want to this time.
No worries. All right, so I'm going to talk about the finance team. A lot is remaining the same. The director of chapter finance roles and responsibilities remain the same, and the collegiate finance coordinators and the alumni finance coordinator will continue to work with the director of chapter finance. We will be adding more subject matter expert training to the role for the CFCs to help our local advisors, those local advisors for the VPFs. From the housing side, because we also have the sorority housing piece to it, the director of housing will have her title renamed to the director of sorority housing, just to clarify her role. Her responsibilities remain the same, and the housing coordinators that work with this director also are staying the same, but we're going to add the word sorority to their job title also for clarification. The audit, investment, and finance committees will remain the same. We're not reimagining any positions other than the few changes I've mentioned before, but we are getting an addition to our team called the Director of Housing Partnerships. This is a new position that will act as a liaison between the sorority supervised, and NHC participant corporations. And here is our organization chart. You can see that the directors will collaborate with the finance staff. The coordinators will work with the directors of housing and chapter finance respectively. And you can see that training piece to the CFC's position as highlighted in yellow. And they have frequently works with the chapter finance specialist and then occasionally works with the programming staff from that training perspective. And that's it for finance. It was fun.
All right. Well, if you think finance is fun, wait till you hear about the new volunteer positions that we are adding. So I'll just go over each of them very quickly. The first is a director of strategic projects. So this person will assist in coordinating and then holding all the task forces and work groups accountable to their charges and their timelines. We've had a lot of task forces operating in the past year or more, a 150th anniversary task force, a history task force, a volunteer structure task force that you've heard a lot about tonight. We have a National Council Elections Task Force. I think I just got their report in my inbox like 5 minutes before this meeting started. So we have a lot of these task forces that are ongoing, and the national president has typically appointed and overseen these task forces. And that is something that we can easily take off of the poor national president's plate and have a volunteer who can make sure that all of those task forces are staying on task and have their questions answered and are staying on their timelines. The next is the director of ritual and a ritual advisory committee. So similar to the other advisory councils that you've heard about tonight in the collegiate relations, the collegiate alumni relations sphere and the PR sphere, et cetera, we will create a ritual advisory council that is led by a director of ritual, and they'll be available to educate and answer ritual related questions from our chapters. So that group will work closely with the programming coordinators, who I know get a lot of ritual questions, the CDDs, the ABSs, and the director of alumni collegiate relations to answer all questions related to ritual. So if you are a ritual fan, a ritual guru, very exciting new opportunity. Next is the personnel committee. So the role of the personnel committee will be to lead the volunteer interview and selection process. This will be a group of members who are not currently volunteers, who have HR and volunteer or association experience. We're looking for a large number, like maybe even 15 people to serve on the personnel committee. And the job description for that committee and a call out will go out the week of June 21st, so that we can get that committee into place very soon and get them organized and given their charge. And then finally is the DEIA focus area. So the current DEIA committee's appointment ends in August. That's a 1-year appointment. Current committee members can reapply, and then we'll hopefully get some new people into that committee as well. We're reviewing the charge, and we're going to give the committee a new charge, have it operate more like a DEIA think tank, making specific recommendations on assigned subjects. And a call out for that will be going out in the coming weeks. And then a DEIA focus will also be added to volunteer job descriptions, including the CDDs, the programming coordinators, the risk management coordinators, the ABSs, and this new public relations advisory council. So we've thought a lot about what DEIA issues repeatedly come up for our collegiate chapters. It always has to do with programming, interpersonal issues in the chapter, social media. So we will build expertise on assisting chapters with all of those issues into the volunteer structure. There is an image of what those other new positions look like. So the director of ritual and her ritual advisory council, they'll be supported by legal counsel, Julia Kazicki, who is our ritual expert on staff. And then the director of strategic projects will be supported by all senior leadership on staff. And then we've got the personnel committee and the DEIA focus area that will continue to operate as umbrella groups for the whole organization. I'll turn it over, I think, to Jordan Feldhaus to talk a little bit more about what's coming for the local advisory board structure.
Thanks, Anne. And the reason why this is coming now is because I'm going to kind of take that braid, that French braid, and wind together some of the things that Megan was talking about with the collegiate coordinator position, Molly was speaking about with that recruitment supervisor role, and with Jen Rainey talking about some of the changes to the finance team. And that is the new advisory board structure. So with the changes, the advisory board supervisor will be a little bit elevated with some additional responsibilities, allowing her to make a lot of decisions at that local level. mirroring that support that the volunteer structure really wanted, the task force wanted for all of our volunteers to make decisions and not have to move things up through the chain and get broken down in that process. So because of that, the ABS is going to be not supervising any sort of officer role anymore. So they will truly serve as the advisory board supervisor. And the main 3 key advisors that we want our advisory boards to focus on over this next year and in 2022 is the collegiate management advisor. So this is a new advisor role. The finance advisor role with those additional responsibilities related to housing and other things from the finance team. And then the recruitment advisor role. So as the combination of the RS and VPMA roles combine, those 3 positions will become very vital to that survival of the chapter. And so these 3 women, the ABS, along with these 4 women, the ABS and these 3 advisors will become the nucleus for our collegiate chapters. This will be a slow roll, though. Most of everything that's come before my talking right now will happen pretty much immediately in January 1, and Anne will hit on the timeline following this. But the ABS changes and the advisory board changes will be a slow roll over the next 3 years. We don't want a quick switch. We want this to be something that is methodical and thought about, because as a part of this is that the ABS will be able to decide what additional advisors, in addition to those 3, that she would like. And so with that, we will offer several different structures, and it will accordion out, expand, and collapse as needed. So for example, to Molly's point about the new recruitment advisor role, underneath her, she could have a VPM advisor, she could have a COB chairwoman advisor, she could have specific micro volunteers that do specific days planning for primary recruitment, and it can really expand, and we'll provide that structure and recommendations. Or it could collapse. If that one recruitment advisor wants to do it all, that's great. This opens access to some younger alumni who might want to volunteer immediately. So they won't have to wait to get involved, as those that requirement to kind of wait a year or so won't be there anymore. They can get access a lot quicker to these smaller advisory board roles and not necessarily have to wait on those bigger ones. So these recommendations came from like that place of a lot of autonomy and giving those ABSs that ability to make changes based off of chapter need, campus culture need, and all of that. And so with the additional supervision of that CDD elevating her role as well, this becomes a very great working relationship, increasing opportunities to just to lessen the load on all of our volunteers. And then as Megan talked about with the volunteer training coordinators on the collegiate management team, that bench will be ready to go if there are any vacancies for those 3 main positions, as well as lots of training for all of our local advisory board members. And then as we unfold over those 3 areas, they will kind of group into operational teams, as I was mentioning, and accordion out from there. So as you can see here, the rationale for those changes. And then the next slide is what it looks like in a graphic. And I'll turn it back to Bentledge and Anne.
All right, thanks, Jordan. Okay, so let's talk about what's coming up next. So you now have this information. We wanted to give this to you before we start announcing it to our members and to our chapters and everybody that will start next week. So, we wanted you to give the heads up to hear this all from us first and get this presentation. We're working on emails to the membership for next week. So we'll have a targeted communication going to local advisors and collegiate chapters that start to give them a heads up on the changes to the structure. And then also a more generalized communication to our membership at large, so that people who are not plugged into the volunteer structure currently are still getting this information. We'll then have Lowdown Lives in July, so that anybody who's interested in learning more can pop on, and we'll do, I think there's 3 of them planned, one to talk about the shift to governance, one to talk about the national volunteer structure, and then one to talk about the local volunteer structure. So we'll keep doing that through July. And then just all the education that you can imagine. We're going to incorporate the transition to governance and the volunteer structure changes into most of our conversations about everything. Man, if I don't know how many times I've gone through those governance slides at this point, if you're on the nominating committee or the Panhellenic team or both of those things, or you attended the virtual volunteer summit, you've probably heard me go through those slides a million times. We don't want this to be a surprise to anybody when we show up at convention in 2022. This is an important change, but it's also a big cultural shift for Sigma Kappa. So we want to get people talking about it. We want to get your questions answered. We want to talk about it as much as we can. We've got a year to, to let everybody know, to get everybody on board, and to make sure everybody is good and understands where we're going. Staff is currently working on creating job descriptions for all the new national volunteer positions so that we can hammer out where decision-making authority lies on various things that used to belong to the National Council that we will no longer be exercising as we shift to governance. Those are due on at the end of July. So those will be, continue to be formulated in the next 6 weeks. And then we'll head in the late summer and early fall into volunteer appointments. So we've heard loud and clear through our DEIA work that we need to make the paths for volunteer service more transparent and inclusive. So we will be interviewing for all positions. But just as is true in the business world, and as in Sigma Kappa staff, the interview process looks different for those who are currently serving in the job. So you shouldn't assume that just because, if you're serving in the job and you're doing a great job, you should apply for your position, and you will have the opportunity to move into that position again. Our hope is that all members who want to volunteer will find a meaningful way to connect and care for our members in our chapters or our sorority. We don't want you to stress about being placed somewhere in a volunteer position. We have room for everybody. We've been experiencing kind of a volunteer drought in the last couple of years, especially during the pandemic. So we want to make sure that you understand that you're welcome, and we want you to reapply and look at some of the new positions too that might sound interesting to you as you think about what looks new and exciting in this structure. As we head toward interviews for volunteer positions, those will be conducted by members of this personnel committee that we're getting ready to appoint. And there will be members of the personnel committee plus a subject matter expert from staff or from the volunteer team conducting interviews. We'll interview for director positions first as we move into the fall and winter, followed by coordinators and ABSs. And if a member is interested in multiple roles, they won't need to interview multiple times. You can let us know in the application that you're interested in multiple things. If a member is not selected for, the first position she wants, they can be considered for other positions and don't need to continue interviewing again. So that is a lot of information. And like Jordan said at the beginning, we've been processing this information for a while, and we realized that we just kind of laid it all out here for you in about 65 minutes. We know that many of your teams probably have time to debrief and talk about it. And we want to just reiterate that we're not changing things here just to change them. We're doing this because we want to set Sigma Kappa up for success to become a strategic leader within NPC. And so we've taken just quite a critical look at what is the work that needs to be done in Sigma Kappa and how can we best plug in volunteers all over the place to get that work done and to support our chapters and our members in the best possible way. We need to redistribute responsibilities from the National Council to the staff and other volunteers in order to get the volunteers who are on the board focused 100% or as close to it as possible, focusing on strategy. And we are extremely, extremely grateful for all of the work that you do to push Sigma Kappa forward on a daily basis, and will continue to do as we start to implement this new structure. We're excited about it. Thank you again to Molly and Madison and our volunteer structure task force. This has been just an incredible amount of work. We know that you likely have questions. If there are any general questions about how this works or anything like that, you can feel free to drop those in the chat or come off mute. If you have questions about your specific team, we'll leave those to follow up team meetings. I'll watch the chat just for
I have a question. I'm just curious about how you see these advisory council roles working and how the collegiate chapters will communicate with them, since they won't have like one direct point person. Just curious about how that will work.
Yeah, does somebody, Molly, do you want to take that or? Okay.
Yeah. So I think similar in the way that some other kind of committee or council type structures work right now. The one that comes to mind, maybe like Live with Heart facilitators, where there is like a form or an email account. I know inclusion@sigmacappa.org is reviewed every day by someone on staff, and then emails are sent out to the appropriate parties. And so the good thing about both of those advisory councils, the public relations one and the collegiate alumni relations one, is that there is still a director of those teams. So there is kind of a main point person, and it could be a Google form, it could be an email account, it could be whatever that advisory council decides. And then they could take in the requests. It could be somebody from the advisory council who's kind of the admin person, and they take in the requests and then ferret out the needs based on who it might fit best with on the advisory council. So again, and that's in the best case scenario, how we could see that working.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, we've got some more questions coming in, and I've got the chat open, so I will answer these as I see them or turn it over to other people. Suzanne asks, does this have to be voted on? No, changes to the national volunteer structure can be made by the National Council outside of a convention. Those don't need to be voted on. The bylaws give that authority. So this has already been voted on by the council or formulated by the council. Let's see, Molly Beck asks, is the NVPF keeping her title for legal reasons, or is there a different rationale? It's a little bit of both. Yes, we need to have a VP finance, and that is also just a critical skill set that we need to have somebody on the council overseeing, since a huge part of the fiduciary duty of the board is to protect our assets. Rebecca Flanagan, general question about national council size. Is there consideration to have a different number of council members than 8? Yes, that is a great question, and that is not a change that we're looking to make as we shift to the governance model in 2022. We actually have in the National Council Elections Task Force, that was one of the questions that we asked them to think about. And we may make a change to the number of people on National Council, but not in 2022. So what we would likely do if we decided that that the council should be a different size is to do a prospective amendment at a future convention to change the size to 10 or 6 or whatever the number is, and then have that go into effect at the following convention. Let's see. We've got, if we serve as a recruitment supervisor in the district, let's save the question, Trisha, about the operation of the recruitment supervisor on the advisory board for a specific team meeting. And yeah, I think that's all the questions I see. Awesome. I'm going to close the chat here, but you can certainly keep questions coming. Awesome. If you have more questions, feel free to continue sending them to the staff members that you work with, to your volunteer supervisor. We want to get all your questions answered. We want to make sure that that everybody is comfortable and understands the rationale and understands where we're going from here. And again, I just want to reiterate to you how much we appreciate all of the work that you're doing for Sigma Kappa on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and that you will continue to do for Sigma Kappa in the future. We really couldn't do the work that we do without you. Sigma Kappa remains, although our staff has professionalized quite a bit over the past 10 plus years, Sigma Kappa remains a volunteer-driven organization, and that is great thanks to all of you. So thank you for your time and attention tonight. Keep your questions coming as you have them. And again, you'll get all the visuals and all of that moving forward. And so hopefully we can all, get on the same page and keep moving from here. But we wanted to give you all just a little preview of this before we start rolling it out to the membership next week. All right. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening.